A provincial police station in eastern Ukraine. On the streets outside, there's a battle for control. A shot rings out. This was Slavyansk on Saturday morning. This is where it all began. That man in the blue jacket, he's a local journalist. The mob has decided he's an enemy of their cause. In towns across this region, angry pro-Russian protesters have been taking over government buildings. We arrived in Slavyansk just afterwards. Our car was stopped by the same crowd. Well, the protesters are extremely aggressive. They just saw us with our camera. They threatened us. They broke our memory chips. They told us to get back in the car and get out of here immediately. What is by now a familiar pattern, we got news that police stations were falling to protesters in other towns as well. We went to find the journalist, who'd fled in search of safety.
I'll carry on. I'm used to this. I've had death threats. I've had threatening notes and text messages. Someone threw a rock through the windscreen of my car.
Russia has explicitly denied sending special forces into eastern Ukraine. But who were the men then who seized the police station?
There were about 100 of them. 10 to 15 guys were clearly soldiers. They arrived in a minibus. I couldn't tell whether they were Russian or Ukrainian. The rest were local guys wearing military fatigues.
We returned to Slavyansk the following day. The protesters had by now barricaded themselves inside the police compound. We got permission to go in and film at what's becoming the centre of this rebellion. The men at the gate referred to their commander by his nickname, Slava. Clearly these were local guys, not the Russian special forces that were on open display in Crimea. But they were armed. We saw at least a dozen men carrying Kalashnikov rifles and other firearms, weapons they appeared to have taken from the armory inside the police station itself. These men said they were old friends from the local school. Some were still neighbours. There was nothing organised about it, says Kolya. He's a carpenter and he heard what was happening on TV, jumped straight in a taxi and came here. His friend Sanya, a car mechanic, admits that they did take some of the equipment out of the police station, just to defend ourselves, he says. All of them refuse to recognise the new authorities in Kiev. They want a referendum on independence for the Donbass region. I don't need Russia, I don't need America or England, says Kolya. I just want to be left in peace in my own country without someone telling me how to live my life. Today, Kiev indicated it might consider some sort of referendum on autonomy. But it's also sending in military hardware. And for these citizens of Slavyansk, that is a scary thought. They've put up barricades on the roads into town in anticipation of an attack.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, помогите, обещал.
Vladimir Putin, help us, please, says this man. It's clear who he sees as the guarantor of his security. These local women are preparing Molotov cocktails. They say they're ready for a fight, but they're not Russian special forces. But who are these men, seen here taking over the police station in the nearby town of Kramatorsk? Could these be the Russian special forces? They certainly look more disciplined and better armed than the local activists. Might this be the pattern? The men with the big guns go in first and then retreat, leaving the locals to hold the building. It is clear that there are overt links between some of the Donbass separatists and Russian nationalist groups. This, for example, is Alexander Dugin, pictured here in South Ossetia in 2008, just weeks before the Russians invaded Georgia. Dugin is a Russian ideologue with links to the Kremlin who advocates a greater Eurasian empire. Here he is in late March, giving advice over Skype to one of the leading Donetsk rebels. In a conversation littered with words like traitors and enemies, Dugin tells the separatists they should organise local self-defence forces. Set up your own checkpoints, he says. Take control of the eastern border. There's no suggestion that this particular activist or Dugin have been involved in the seizure of government buildings. But this conversation closely mirrors the thinking here inside separatist headquarters in the centre of Donetsk. At a meeting of the Donetsk Republican Soviet, separatist leaders discussed their plans, including seizing control of airports, railway stations, military installations and those border posts. And they were clear whom they'd turn to if Kiev attacked in response.
We'll call on Russia for help. We'll call on Belarus and Kazakhstan. We'll even ask Georgia. I know plenty of people who are sick and tired of what happened after their revolution.
Back in Slavyansk, the protesters remain in control of the police station. The separatists now occupy a dozen buildings across the region. What happens now here inside this police compound is absolutely crucial to the future of this country. If this standoff can somehow be resolved peacefully, then there's hope for a united Ukraine, east and west together. But if this place is stormed, if these barricades are broken down and there are mass casualties, then the ramifications of that will be felt hard and for a long time to come. Kiev is losing control, but any crackdown could become the pretext for a Russian invasion. One false move could lead to war.